They say money has no memory, but I can tell you there are bills that burn your hands and coins that weigh more than lead. Today, as I sat looking out at my garden watching my grandkids run around, I was reminded of a pale blue scrap of paper from 1974, a piece of paper that almost cost me my honor, my first apartment, and most importantly, the way my father looked at me. If you're over 60, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You remember what it meant back then for a check to come back home with that big red stamp, NSF, non-sufficient funds. It wasn't just an accounting error, it was a stain on your name. This is the story of how a $42 mistake taught me the greatest lesson in integrity of my life. And why today, in a world of credit cards and instant taps, I feel like we've lost something precious along the way. I was 22 years old, living in a cramped studio on the outskirts of Chicago. Rent was $110 a month. Back then, I felt like the king of the world. I had my first real job at a local printing press and drove a beat-up Chevy Nova that burned more oil than gas. In those days, money was physical. You felt it in your wallet. It wasn't just digits on a screen. You had your checkbook, that little vinyl-covered bookend. Every time you put pen to paper, you are signing a promise. My father always told me, "Son, a man is only as good as his word, and his word is written in his checks." But you think your parents' rules are just old-fashioned exaggerations? I wanted to impress a girl, Susan. She was everything a 22-year-old kid dreams about. And that's where the trouble started. Pride. It was Friday night. I had exactly $45 in my bank account. My paycheck wasn't hitting the bank until Monday morning. But Susan wanted to go to that new steakhouse down by the lake. I knew I shouldn't. My brain was screaming, "Stay home, eat canned soup." But my ego whispered, "Don't be cheap. It's just a few dollars. You'll cover it Monday." I wrote the check. $42.60, tip included. I remember the feel of the ballpoint pen on the paper. I remember the sound of the waiter whisking the bill away. That night, I slept like a baby, feeling like a man of the world. But Monday, reality gave me a wake-up call I can still feel today. That Monday evening, the Chicago air felt colder than usual. My father was sitting in his wingback chair, the same spot where he read the paper every day since he came home from the war. He didn't look up when I walked in. The smoke from his pipe drifted in the air, that cherry tobacco scent I always associated with home, but that night it felt suffocating. "Sit down, Isaac," he said, using my full name. It was never a good sign. He set the paper aside with deliberate slowness. He looked at me over his reading glasses. There was no anger in his eyes, and that's what broke me. There was a deep sadness, a kind of weariness that said, "I thought I raised you better." "Ike called me today," he continued. "He said your signature on a piece of paper isn't worth the paper it's written on." He asked me if you were in trouble, or if you had simply forgotten who you are. I tried to stammer out an excuse. I talked about the bank, the delay in my deposit, how expensive the menu was. He just held up a hand, and silence flooded the room again. "Son, the bank didn't make the mistake. You made it the moment you opened that checkbook, knowing you were gambling with another man's labor. Because that's what you did. You ate his food, used his table, and gave him a false promise in return. In this family, we don't gamble with other people's hard work." He handed me an envelope. Inside was $42.60. "You're going to go see him right now. You're going to hand him this, and you're going to ask for his forgiveness. Not an explanation, not an excuse, just forgiveness." And then you're going to pay me back every cent by working double shifts at the shop this weekend. Your word is in the red today, Isaac. Start balancing your books. I walked the 6 blocks to Ike's diner. Every step felt like I was wearing lead boots. I remember passing a record store window and seeing a Fleetwood Mac poster. For a second, I wanted to be anyone else, anywhere else. I walked into the diner, the sound of silverware clinking and the low hum of conversation felt deafening. Ike was behind the counter, wiping a glass with a white rag. He was a man of few words, with the calloused hands of someone who'd spent 30 years over a grill. I stepped up. My hands shook a little as I placed the envelope on the polished wooden bar. Mr. Ike. I'm sorry, I said, barely above a whisper. Here is what I owe you, plus the bank fee. I have no excuse. I was irresponsible. Ike stopped wiping the glass. He stared at me for what felt like an eternity. Then he took the envelope, tucked it into his apron pocket, and gave a single nod. Your father is a good man, Isaac, he said gruffly. Don't make people doubt that because of your actions. Go on home. There was no pat on the back. No, don't worry about it. Just the cold acceptance of a debt settled. That night, I learned that forgiveness isn't always a hug. Sometimes it's just being allowed to walk through the front door again, with your head held high. Today, I see young people swiping their phones, taking out buy now, pay later loans with a single click. I wonder if they ever feel that weight in their chest when their word is on the line. Sometimes, technology makes us forget that behind every transaction, there's a person, a struggle, and a promise. If you're listening to this and you're young, guard your name. It's the only thing that truly belongs to you when everything else fades away. And if you're from my generation, wow, I'm sure you have a bounce check of your own tucked away in your memory. Thank you for walking down memory lane with me today. It means the world to share these pieces of my life with you.